Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, and thanks to the organizers for the invitation. We're not used to participating or intervening in events organized by specialized magazines, but today we decided to do so because of the importance of SteelOrbis, because of the importance of the relations with Turkey. So we are very happy to be here and to discuss the topic assigned to us. I was saying outside of this room that structure and economic situations are intertwined at this critical time for steel businesses in Italy and in Europe today. The issue of the economic situation is one that cyclically comes to the fore because our job is a cyclical one. Our industry is cyclical when demand slows down because of several different factors. Geopolitical uncertainties, first and foremost, the increase in interest rates. Peter Marcus told us that steel consumption is driven by the fixed assets investment ratio, i.e. the ratio of demand devoted to fixed assets investments more than consumption. And of course, when interest rates are higher than in the past, demand slows down. When demand slows down, as is always the case in cyclical industries, there is an excess in supply. The Chinese events, the decline of domestic GDP in China, hence the impossibility for the Chinese steel industry to slow down production, also for public order reasons, because they have no social measures and no unemployment support. That pushes them to look for outlets for their excessive production. We exceeded 10 million per month exports of China. The year will end with a record export of the historical record that was 110 million tons. This huge amount of exports is looking for outlets that are not in the United States because they are completely closed. They found them in the Southeastern Asia. Japan asked for the closure of their boundaries to Chinese imports, and they found export outlets in Europe, which is still the most open market worldwide. So we have a lot of materials, partly direct exports, partly from third countries like Vietnam and Egypt. So lots of material comes to Europe. Of course, this crisis of declining demand and increased supply is intertwined with some structural events concerning European steel industry, especially the Green Deal and decarbonization. While measures, I do not fully understand what you said with no doubts. Of course, I'm not a negationist. I believe that we should all work for climate change, but the way the Green Deal is being implemented in Europe deserves a lot of ifs and a lot of buts. Especially the measures that have been undertaken are measures that were not analyzed in terms of impact and cost benefits. So, as we said many times, decarbonization, if managed like this, turns into deindustrialization, and it's a big problem for Europe. Let me make the example of CBAM. You know that, again, for ideological reasons, Vestager, the Commissioner for Competition, said that if we introduce custom protection, environmental custom duties, CBAM is custom duties. Of course, in Europe, we have no custom duties, but for the environment. So if we introduce that, we cannot maintain free allowances because this would be tantamount to double health. So the result is that as from 2030, the other European funds that represent 80%, 135 tons of steel produced in Europe will not be made. To make a ton of steel, it takes 2 tons of CO2, which is emitted at a price of €100 per ton. It means having a novel price of 350 euro plus $200-300 additional dollars. So production fully made in Europe become totally impossible. Will it change? Maybe. Let's see what the new Commission does. But as of today, that's the situation. So European steel producers with the integral cycle are sort of waiting and seeing. They're closing a major production from integral cycle is coming to an end, which will destroy the remaining automotive production in Europe. In Italy, we are all very proud because we produce everything from electric furnaces, so we believe we are the most advanced in Europe in terms of decarbonization. But you know that with electric furnaces, you can manufacture all steels except for one flat steel, which is used to make car bodies. So Europe, in sort of delirium, decided that the European automotive industry, which is already suffering, will have to buy flat steel outside of Europe, in Asia, China, Japan, and Korea, so competing countries in the automotive industry. Latins used to say that God makes those he wants to lose blind, and that's the situation that we're faced with. So the big unknown is what will happen of the European industry in the next 5-10 years. My forecast is probably based on postponement. So interventions on the timing of CBAM, so postponing the end of free allowances by a few years, but structurally this doesn't change anything. Our industry is capital intensive, investments must be planned. If we are acting on a short horizon, I cannot plan investments. You cannot invest in a blast furnace if the time horizon is only a few years ahead. Now, let's come to the Italian steel market. This will mean a moderate partial conversion from integrated cycle to electric furnace, with a search for scrap, so shortage of scrap in Europe, which will become increasingly worse. So in addition to an increased demand due to partial conversion from integral production to electric furnace, so there will be a decline in the production of scraps, especially new scrap from the automotive industry, because car manufacturing in Europe will decline, and there will be a difficulty in importing scrap since decarbonization in steel production is a worldwide issue. There is a shift in production from electric furnaces from 25 to 43% of the total by 2030. That's the estimate, which will make scrap an even more critical and strategic asset. So more than 60 countries have already adopted more than 70 measures to reduce scrap exports. In Europe, we ask for scrap to become critical raw materials. So when we talk a lot, we discuss a lot about circular economy, we continue discussing about decarbonization. Scrap, which is raw material for the steel industry, must be protected, especially if exports are carried out towards countries that do not comply with ETS international rules. So they benefit from a double benefit because they take away scrap already paying CO2 and they're not subject to ETS rules. This year from Rotterdam and Antwerp, somehow from Italy, 18 million tons of scrap left the country's historical records. 56% of the scrap ended up in Turkey because Turkish steel industry is based on electric furnaces, so they could take a lot of scrap. I don't want to talk about ideology. Being all on the same boat means recognizing priorities. When I talk to Assoferment's friends, they should look at profitability of distribution in the United States. Look at profitability of distribution of your activities, your businesses in the United States. Is 3 times as high as here, as well as marginality of production, which means that we are all on the market. We all want to comply with the rules of the international market, provided that it's a fair market. You cannot avoid opposing unfair trade. Europe, compared to other areas worldwide, so far has been the area with the most open markets. I'm quoting Mr. Draghi, so I cannot be accused to be not much on the market. Draghi said that if you live in a jungle of carnivore animals and you're an herbivorous animal, you're going to live bad because the risk is that you disappear. So let's not forget this principle. I mean, the rules that we apply to international trade must account for the industrial profile of the various areas in the world, and they have to start from the fact that protecting the industry is a priority, because otherwise there's no industry, no trade, nothing but poverty. Italians are first, so we're not negationists, we're not denying a reality. Italy is the #1 steel industry in Europe in terms of decarbonization. As a consequence of the crisis that affected Ilva, which is now producing low level of steel, this year we produced 85% of our products from electric furnaces. We're not happy with just being European champions. We want to become world champions of green steel, and we're close to the target. Why? Because on Scope 1, we are fully decarbonized. Our carbon footprint is okay already. We are now dealing with Scope 2, that is the carbon footprint of the energy that we buy from the network. We are in a good position there too, because 1/3 of electricity that we consume is already from renewable sources. And some days we said that 50% of production and consumption of electricity in Europe came from renewable sources. That's last summer. But let's be conservative and let's say 1/3 of energy is renewable, which will come to the steel industry due to the energy release regulation passed by the government. So, the government will transfer a share, which is about 1/3 of our electric consumption, will be taken from renewable sources vis-à-vis the commitment to develop new sources. We are working with France to design a long-term plan for nuclear energy, which could cater to the missing one-third of renewable energy. If the deal succeeds, and we're working on that, Italy will be first worldwide to have totally green steel, which means a lot in terms of sustainability and long-term prospects for our industries, in terms of value of our industries, and in terms of the capacity to fulfill customers' demand, because customers are already asking for green steel. There are many uses where the clients of our clients are pushing on that kind of steel. Even without thinking of price premiums for green steel, I believe that faced with the same amount of steel demanded, if you require that from a green steel producer, if the price is equal, green manufacturers will win over non-green manufacturers if they prove that their carbon footprint is zero. The second big issue we have is the shortage of scrap. There has always been a shortage of scrap in Italy. For a long time, we paid domestic scrap a bit more than the international price. I hear people talking crazily about the arrival of new electric furnaces without saying how the demand of those electric furnaces will be catered for. The road is always that of DRI, but DRI is the difficult topic in Europe and in Italy because of the cost, because these are highly capital-intensive investments. In addition to the plant investment, you have to invest in carbon traps. It halves the footprint of the blast furnace, but it still has a footprint. If you do not have carbon allowances, you have to deal with that carbon footprint. And then there is the price of gas. Of course, DRI plants are not made in Europe because there is an issue of gas prices. DRI plants are usually made in gas-rich countries or countries rich in gas and iron ore. So today I hear people talking about an electric furnace in Genoa, and I feel like laughing because building an electric furnace in Genoa means connecting downstream. There is only downstream in Genoa for zinc plating or whatever. It means putting some coils in the middle, and I don't think that this is the right time to get funds in an amount of billions to produce a hot rolled coils. So there's no way to get big investments. So that was probably a joke concerning Genoa. Piombino is more likely to succeed, but I think that today all resources should be concentrated on Taranto. Hopefully Taranto will become a facility that will no longer produce 10 billion tons, but at least it should reach 6-7 billions of tons, which is the break-even point. That should be the main interest of Italian industrial policies, and we should focus and concentrate all possible resources on that. We said it and we are going to repeat it. We will not allow for state aids to finance investments that are not made in compliance with the rules of a careful private investor. So we will not grant any discounts on that. Because, of course, what is at stake is our very survival. And in such a difficult situation as the current one, where the Italian electricity industry never asked for public investments, we continue to make investments funded by private parties. We are an excellence in the European economy. So seeing public resources being focused on fake prospects is not something that we like. One last point before closing. The issue of trading policies and trade protection policies. Italy is a country where manufacturing in 2023 recorded a turnover of 1,200 billion euro and exported 670. So you can easily understand how Italian industrialists cannot be protectionist, because exports are their main asset. Exporting more than 50% of your turnover, lacking competitive currency devaluation means having a pure competitive edge. You need to understand which are the sources and protect them. But vis-a-vis the international markets and international trade, we should have a positive, open attitude. But we should also understand what is happening worldwide, because it's likely that free trade areas will more and more become free trade areas among friendly countries, cluster of friendly countries. You should put this into your head. It's a new concept, but don't forget it. So let me make an example on Law 323 to show you how late Europe is here too. You know that Trump, at the beginning of his mandate, of his term, adopted the measure 232, which is a duty of 25% on steel, European steel and aluminium. Europe filed a big complaint against the United States, complaining that this measure was totally inconsistent with the WTO regulations. President Biden, in the end, understood that he should offer a solution to Europe. We negotiated such solution for 2 years. What was Biden's solution? The solution proposed by Biden was a free trade area concerning NAFTA, the NAFTA, Canada, United States, Mexico, Europe, South Korea, Japan, Australia. Within this free trade area, the Americans wanted to avoid 232, but there was a condition for that, namely that Regulation 232 was still in force for China, because they didn't want Europe to become a sort of a gate to China. Still, that would then reach the United States. We thought it was a good proposal, because we would go back to exporting to the United States. Today, the exports of European steel to the United States is equal to 0. I talked to Dombrovskis twice. The third time, I would have punched him in the face, because he continued to say it's not compatible with WTO rules. The American proposal is not compatible with WTO rules. So what happened? What happened was that Europe refused the American proposal, and we continue not to export anything to the United States. And probably we missed out an opportunity. Now, think if Trump is re-elected, the 25% custom duty will become 50%. So out of globalist idealism and because of German interests, the Germans came clean when they voted against the custom duties for electric cars. Every time in Germany there is something that touches Chinese interests, and so national German interest with China, the Germans are in crisis. And on that occasion too, they prevented the European Commission to adopt a measure and to resolve a trading conflict with the US, which could have been solved for the benefit of the European industry.